Everybody's so captivated. It's almost like you're assuming that I'm going to begin with a corny joke. Did you make that assumption? Many of you did. You know what they say about assuming. Actually, now we know that I am assuming that you know what they say about assuming. And that was my corny joke. Wow. All right. Well, no. It really was just a platform for me to get to the fact that, guess what? We're always making assumptions, right? We're always making assumptions. If you're like me, we're always making assumptions, and we are always making expectations out of our assumptions. And so as we begin this year, it's really an opportunity for us to, well, think about which assumptions we want to take with us and which ones are the old us, which ones aren't going to be serving us, to being able to live that life that we've all set out to live in this new year. And when we really allow ourselves to question these assumptions, and we make assumptions about ourselves, right? About whether we're worthy or not of something. We make assumptions about we definitely make assumptions about other people, right? I know some of us don't want to admit it as much, but we do. We make assumptions about life and how life is supposed to be. Some of us are living through life with the assumption that life has to be hard, that life has to be difficult, that I have to always be challenged by life. And we make assumptions about God and our relationship with God. How many of us, and I'm going to call this an assumption, how many of us grew with the assumption that we were separate from the divine, that we were separate from God? And as a result of us thinking and having the expectation that that assumption was real, we led lives that really didn't fully fulfill us and fully didn't allow us to recognize that we are worthy of love. Because let me tell you, if there is any healing that needs to take place in any area of our lives, my belief is that it's based on a core belief that we are separate from the divine, that we are separate from God. And so being able to really question that assumption and moving beyond that assumption to what is real about us and about God and our relationship with God, that's where the magic happens. And that's when we are fully able to live into our truth, which is one that creates heaven on earth. Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of The Four Agreements, says that the problem with making assumptions is that we believe that they are truth. We could swear that they are real. I want to talk to you about the assumptions that we make based on a false image of who we are and based on a false understanding of how our lives have been. The false assumptions that there is something that we are unworthy of, that there is something that is separating us from the life that we want to live, the ways in which we want to show up in the world. That's the kind of stuff I want to talk to you about today, because we have so much assumed the bad, the negative, that which doesn't serve us, that we've become a victim to it a lot of the times. And we have allowed ourselves to be limited by the assumptions of the past. See, for me, what I really want to get to is recognizing that the assumptions that held me in captivity of the past, I don't have to take those assumptions with me into this new life that I'm creating for myself. And one of the things that we can use to really dismantle those false assumptions is just the power of curiosity. Like, just to be curious about what we are believing, to be curious about who we are, how life is showing up for us. And we are born with that sense of curiosity. Some of us may be living into it stronger than others in this moment, but we all can really allow ourselves to live into curiosity more fully. Unfortunately, we've been conditioned to not be as curious. And it may have started so innocently when we were little kids, asking about the world or asking about what is going on in the day. And very innocently, a parent or somebody that we were asking questions to, saying to us, "You've asked enough. Don't ask me, ask them. Didn't I answer that for you already? Shouldn't you already know that?" And all of a sudden, that "shouldn't you already know that" created, at least for me, a sense of, well, I better pretend I know the answers. Because if it's not safe for me to ask the questions, I got to pretend that I know the answers because I'm asking the questions to feel safe and to feel secure. And so I got to pretend that I have the answers to feel a false sense of safety and of comfort. And so little by little, we start to pretend that we know. And little by little, we lose our courage to ask. And little by little, we also believe the stories that other people say about us. And sometimes those stories are the things that are actually keeping us down. Sometimes those stories are the things that are actually hurting us more than just being open to not knowing and still moving in faith. Because the moment that we stop being curious about what other people, how we will own what other people say about us, is the moment that we just pretend that it's real. And all of a sudden, that false sense of being just gets expanded and compounded. And all of a sudden, we again become very limited by it. But we can dismantle the conditioning. And we have the power to dismantle it. And we have the power to let go of the assumptions and move into the truth and move into real reality. Isaac Asimov says, "Your assumptions are the windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while, or the light won't come in." What assumptions have you been making about yourself? What assumptions have we been making about humanity, about life, that is keeping us from fully experiencing the light of God, fully experiencing our own light, and fully allowing our light? See, when we dismantle those assumptions that are keeping us in that sense of captivity, that are keeping us limited, it's not only that we get to experience and receive the light that is outside of us, but it's also that we clean up the windows just enough to be able to share our light with others and have that light be fully experienced. Many times we underestimate our light. Have you noticed that? Are you living some of that, right? Like a lot of times, and the moment that we take on those assumptions that we are less than, that we are not enough, it's the moment we suffer. It's the moment we suffer. And sometimes it's not because it just, it shows up in the world, but even that thought, it is so false that something, I truly believe this, something within us knows it is so false that it hurts, whether we're conscious of it or not. And that is the thing that we are working to heal from, the ways in which we have hurt ourselves by not believing in us and not by having our identity and our belief about life and God and others and us based and foundational in the truth, in who we are. Have you ever looked at a job and said to yourself, "Oh, that would be a great job, and I'm not going to get it"? An assumption. Have you looked at somebody in a relationship and they look so loving and so beautiful and it's so cute, and you're like, "Oh, I really want that." And then you assume, "Oh, but I've been hurt so many times. I'm damaged. I won't have that." It's an assumption. And it's an assumption that we in this very moment can say no longer has any power over us. I've shared with some of you before that you probably know I make assumptions. But I made an assumption many years ago. I walked into what is now my home with my husband, and we actually called our home the "too good for us" house. Because it was just too good for us. It was too pretty. It was too big, right? It was too good for us. And I've been sitting with, the assumptions that I made that it was too good for us and where that assumption comes from. And so part of it is I felt unworthy of such a nice house. I was assuming that I didn't belong in that house, that it was too much for what I valued myself for. If I go deeper into that, though, I also realized that there was a level of fear. Because the way that I said that house is too good for me, it gave me an out to not try to get that house. And I was assuming I was already not going to get it based on what I was making at the time or my credit. So many different things. Maybe I thought it was just too big of a dream, and I was so used to assuming my life was meant for smaller things. But I have to tell you that I am living in that house, and thanks to God, thank God that there was this little sliver of faith, the size of a mustard seed that said, "Well, we'll try it out." I didn't fully believe it, but it was just enough that where I thought there were so many limitations, God made a way. And so how are our assumptions blocking God from making a way through us and into our lives so that we can live our dreams, so that we can manifest and create that which we are here to manifest and create instead of living a false life, instead of living false experiences. And so this year, if you take it on with me, is a year of a fresh start. I love that actually about New Year's. New Year's really does invite us to think about what it is that we want to carry forward, what it is that we want to let go of. New Year, it's this energy, and it's all around us, right? Like of something new being born, and we can really tap into it, and we can then move into an understanding of ourselves. We know this, right? Like we talk about this as whole, as healed, as abundant, as prosperous, as loving, as light, all of those things that we know God to be. And today, truly, if you allow it to be, is the beginning of a new chapter in your life. A new chapter in your life. Now you get to decide what you're going to make of that new chapter. And so we can stop assuming that our past limitations have any power over the present possibilities. And we can do this by trusting in God. Today is a completely clean slate for us. And we get to choose what we put into that slate. Is it going to be the preconceptions, the judgments that we've held about ourselves? Or is it going to be a beginner's mind? Think about having a beginner's mind this year. A beginner mind is that way of seeing the world through innocence, or just whatever we're experiencing through innocence, without the preconceptions, without the judgments, the expectations, the prejudices of what we have lived. Because that's what it really is. All of a sudden, the things that didn't feel so good, felt a little icky, all of a sudden created prejudices about how life was supposed to be or how we are supposed to be in the world. And so we can let go of that by having that beginner's mind and just be present to explore. And so you have your vision, right? You have your goals. I have my vision and I have my goals. And then by letting go of the assumptions that it's going to go wrong, that it's going to be challenging, that it's going to be difficult, that I'm not worthy of it, we can simply allow God to find the way. We can hold the trust and the faith that as we listen to the divine in prayer and meditation, that we will be divinely guided to take the step-by-step and step approach to be able to live into our vision. A beginner's mind is that of like a child, right? And so we're talking about the conditioning that took place in us as children, as we were growing up. And so what better way to move beyond the conditioning to go to the source of how we were when we were brand new kids, curious about the world. And so if something were to come up, it's like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I wonder how that's going to play out. Oh, that's crazy. That's so wild. I wonder how this is going to support me. I wonder how this is going to show up for me. I wonder how this is going to allow me to show up for it. And it's being in that place of wonder. Now, I was thinking about this quite a bit as I was putting this together because so innocently it happens, right? I mean, I can remember some of the times that I've told my 10-year-old son, like, why are you asking how to do this? You've done this 5 million times. Why are you asking? Why would you assume that it's going to be different than the last 10 times that you've done it? It's just as easy to ask, why would you assume that it would happen the same way that it happened the last 10 times? And I am able to recognize that by saying it's supposed to be the way that it's always been, I am limiting the way that it is showing up. And I am limiting the possibilities through which God wants to show up in our lives. Jesus, our way shower, actually talks about the beginner's mind. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 4, it says, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Can we be humble enough to have that beginner's mind, to not assume that the way it was is the way it's going to be, and the ways that we have played it small can limit the way that we play it big today, this year, as we move forward. The Zen Buddhist priest, Suzuki, who wrote a book called The Beginner's Mind, says, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few." Can we be like the children? We talk about God and the field of God being unlimited possibilities. Why would we pretend to be an expert about how life is supposed to be as a result of the ways in which we have limited ourselves, been hurt, been challenged in the past? We were promised that all it takes is that mustard seed size of faith, smallest little seed. We were promised that's all we need in order to be able to move a mountain. I haven't moved the mountain, probably because I don't believe that I can. But the reality is that if we look back on it, we have moved mountains, metaphorically. Metaphorically, and I share this with you, we don't give ourselves enough credit. If we look back on our lives, we have moved mountains. We have done the impossible in our lives, whether in relationships, whether at work, whether just in life in general. We have been able to move mountains, and we just forget. We don't give ourselves enough credit that we have been able to do it. And so this morning, can we just know that we have that seed of faith within us and allow the possibilities to take place? It is much easier for me to go into the road of self-doubt, I don't know about you, than to allow myself to go on the road of this is possible. And to recognize that as things come up in the road, they don't have to be a sign of, oh, there's the past creeping up on me, but instead being like, oh, I wonder what that's all about. I wonder what that's here to show me. I wonder how I can show up in that. It's the power of curiosity. And so when the old fears come up and the old limitations that so many of us said, oh, we're going to leave them behind. And we put it in our burning bowl. Oh, we're going to leave it behind. But they can come up. And so when they do come up, can we feel like we can just not listen to it? Or maybe it's not about not listening to it, but maybe it's about then just being curious about those thoughts, those limiting thoughts that bring us into some suffering. I love Byron Katie. Many of you have known her. She's a friend of Unity on the Base and has come to speak here before. She says, a curious mind is an inquiring mind. And so when we have those thoughts of limitation, when we have those fears come up, she says, just ask 4 questions. So when you see that job being posted online, or you see that person that you really think is really hot and want to go out with, and all of a sudden you have those thoughts come up that I can't, I'm not good enough for it. You can ask yourself, is it true? Is it true that you're not good enough for it? Is it true that you're not going to get it? Is it true that they're not going to ask you out, right? And the answer could be yes, or it could be a no. There's no right or wrong answer here. But then you are asked to move into, can you absolutely know that it is true? Can you absolutely know that it is true? Many of us will probably get to the place of realizing, actually, there's that small seed of faith that it can actually happen, that it is for me, that it is for me to take on, it is for me to live into. Then it asks, well, how do you react? What happens when you believe the thought that you're not good enough, or that you make the assumption that you're not going to get it? Well, if you're like me, that fear doesn't feel good. It feels icky. You can actually feel anger within you, right? Because at the same time that we say it's not for me, sometimes we get angry on ourselves because we have that thought, because we have that assumption. Then who would you be without that thought? Well, I know that I would be much freer. I know that I'd be much more willing. And I know that I would be living my even better life. And so you ask these 4 questions on the thoughts and the assumptions that you've made that make you suffer. And then you can maybe switch it around to what we know to be true, which some people may call an assumption, but guess what? If there's an assumption that I can make in my life, I'd rather be one that uplifts me than one that keeps me down. One that brings a greater sense of grace into my life than one that keeps me playing small. And then the invitation then is to go back to the beginning, again, to the beginning when in our childhood. Well, we can go back to the beginning of the Bible. And the first thing that God does is let there be light. Then we are made in the image of God. And then God says, it is good. And so can we take on the assumption, which I believe to be true, that we are that light, that we are made up of that same energy that God is, and that through that, not only are we good, but our life is meant to be good. That is the foundation that I believe we can spring from. Merriam-Williamson says, the key to abundance is meeting limited circumstances with unlimited thoughts. I love that because it's not about the circumstance. It's about the thoughts and assumptions that we have about the circumstance. And the moment that we switch the thoughts, the moments that we are so curious that we question it and we inquire and we realize that that thought is not serving us and that we can let go of that thought, is the moment where those limited circumstances all of a sudden are seen as the full potential in that very moment of all that God is. It's the moment where those limited circumstances become an unlimited opportunity for us to live into our truth. And so I invite us as we move into this week to really be curious about the assumptions that we've made and ask ourselves, are they helping us, or is it time for us to let them go? Regardless of whether you have asked 1,000,000 times, to ask again. Regardless if you haven't been able to find what you have looked for in the past, to look for it now. And regardless of how many doors have been shut for you in the past, to knock once again. The word of God promised us, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. The door is wide open. Are we willing to cross the threshold into the life that we are meant to live? I think we are. And just like I loved witnessing it with Jessica, I'm going to love witnessing it with all of us. Thank you and namaste. Thank you so much for visiting our YouTube channel. We post new videos every week to keep you positive, present, and inspired to your divinity. Please click on the subscribe button below and also that notification bell. Remember to share this with your friends and your family, those that you know will be inspired just like you have been. And always remember that we love you, that we bless you, that we behold the Christ in you, and we see you doing great things. Thanks and take care.